media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. I must apologize for my voice today. It's a little hoarse. We've had not a lot of talking, but a lot of crying going on. We've had a problem at home when our dog got attacked, and it has affected me tremendously, but he's going to live. We understand from the doctor, so excuse me for being so hoarse. Anyway, today we're pleased to have Carla Howell. She's the political director for the National Libertarian Party, and today she'd like to discuss total government spending, and then we'll get on some ancillary subjects. But we'd like to talk about with spending, something that I'm sure our government has totally under control. Carla, are you there? There you are.
Yeah. I'm
yeah. Now, I don't see what the problem is with spending. They took the cap off the spending limits, right? That means they can spend as much as they want. Right. I mean, what seems to be the problem? Everything seems to be fine right now.
Yeah, they would certainly want us to believe that. They want us to believe in general that more money for the government is a good thing, and that they spend it for the common good and for your good and my good and the good of everybody you love. But in fact, government spending benefits special interests, benefits the government haves as opposed to the government have-nots. The latter still being a majority in this country, though a shrinking majority. And for all of your listeners who understand, by and large, that government is a very big problem, and the bigger it is, the more of a problem it is, what fuels big government is money. What also drives a lot of the people who make it big is money. It is more than anything, much more than ideologically, as they like us to believe. It is driven by greed, by profiteers, crony capitalists, government unions, government employees, government-protected cartels, and foreign governments that profit from U.S. handouts or military protectionism or whatever. It's generally driven by money and power, and nothing that benefits the everyday voter, taxpayer, worker in America. And what fuels it all is our tax dollars, as well as deficit spending, which is crazy. We're now at $4.1 trillion being spent at the federal level, plus I'm told a few $100 billion in off-budget spending. Our governments are notorious for off-the-books spending. And another $3 to $4 trillion, possibly more, at the state and local level, cumulatively. We're talking $8 trillion out of $15 trillion in the gross national product. So more than half of the gross national product is spent directly by governments, and another substantial chunk, perhaps another 4 trillion, depending on whose estimate you believe, is part of the command and controlled economy, basically what regulations mandate that businesses spend or that you spend when you hire an accountant to do your taxes or whatever it is that the government forces you to spend money on. Obamacare now being another big example of that. So government spending is what fuels it all. It is suffocating our economy. It is doing immeasurable damage in many, many ways. What we need to do is shrink it. Now, what some politicians, especially of the Republican ilk, like to talk about, and sometimes Democrats, is cutting government spending or cutting government waste. They all say they're against government waste and want to cut it. Of course, they never do. They vote for bills that make government bigger and bigger and bigger, which results in more and more waste, as well as what's even worse than waste is programs that do exactly what they're intended to do, which is something very bad. like go to war, like hand out money to Halliburton to build boondoggle building projects like the Big Dig in Boston, you name it. The war on drugs, all these things that do far more harm than good. So we need to cut spending, and we need candidates running for office, who are there expressly to cut total government spending. And it's a subject that the Republicans like to be very deceptive about. They like to look fiscally conservative. But their idea of cutting spending is never total government spending. They'll go after this program or that program in their campaign rhetoric. Once they're elected, they'll almost never actually cut anything. But whether you're talking about their campaign platforms or their behavior in office, they never cut the total amount. When they, on rare occasion, cut something, they celebrate that they cut it, but they never explain to you that the budget went up, which means that money simply got transferred to some other dangerous and destructive big government program. Spending is the fuel of big government and all the damage that it does.
Yeah. Well, there seems to be a question as to what our debt really is. For example, if you look at certain websites that monitor government current year's debt, which includes the current year deficit, you'll see anything from $8.1 to $8.5 trillion. That's quite a bit of difference for 1 year of being $400 billion difference. If you look at the long-term debt, the unfunded debt, and I really wish people wouldn't stop using things unfunded debt, because the average person on the street say, oh, unfunded debt, that means we don't have to pay anything, you know? It almost sounds like it's free money. But our long-term debt is really close to, according to Professor Lars Kutlakoff from the University of Boston, he was on the program just a couple of weeks ago, he estimates it now to be in the vicinity of $210 trillion. That's included the unfunded debt. Now, this is more money than the entire world can muster up. I mean, but none of these figures are real because no one has access to the books, like you say, you know, the off the balance sheet items. I'd like to go to the IRS and say, oh no, I didn't make any money. That money I made, that was an off the balance sheet income. Let's not count that. I mean, I would be in chains within 15 minutes. But yet, these, you know, I have to tell you a little story. I'm going to take a little bit of your time. You know, I come from an old Italian family. We're put her on the phone. Put her on back. I want to talk. Yeah, I want to see her. You're a beautiful girl. You take her off the thing, you know, and I got to look at myself. I don't want to look at myself. I want to look at you, you know. Anyway, but, you know, I come from an Italian ghetto. All right. Well, it was a mixed, racially mixed, but you know, primarily it was originally Italian ghetto. And my uncle, who died like 40 years ago, came over here back in 1920 something or other. You know, he belonged to this big organization. It started with an M. It wasn't Monsanto, but it was a big corporation. You know what I mean? And they sort of had their own business worldwide. You know, I tease people because he was the mafioso, you know, and he was in the, what they used to call, you wouldn't believe this, the shoe shine syndicate. Now to him, the only thing that mattered was money. Now he was the black sheep of the family. No one talked to him. My mother wouldn't let him in the house and the whole bit, you know, so, but you know what was interesting about him? Everyone knew he was in organized crime. He was deported, by the way, but everyone knew that. I mean, everyone knew exactly who he was, you know, and everything was on. It was sort of on the up and up, you know. If you wanted to open up a shoe shine kiosk, if you will, on the streets, which made tons of money, you had to go through him, because if you opened it without his permission, you accidentally would disappear the next day, you know. And that's the way they operate. But my point being is that as dishonest as he was, everyone knew it. I mean, there was no bones about it. No one said, oh, he's a saint, you know, he's going to be St. Louis, you know, when he dies or anything like that. Everyone knew him for what he was. And what bothers me, as bad as that is, our government is worse, because what they do is they put a angelic coating over my Uncle Louis, you know, and that's what bothers me. I don't mind if someone comes up to me and says, hey, you know, I'm a tough guy, get in my way, I'll punch your nose in. You know, I understand that. We're on the same page. But don't tell me that, you know, oh, praise the Lord, I'll never touch anyone, I love everyone, and then steal my money. And it seems like the government does that. The government is not only dishonest, but disingenuous, but they're literally sinful, because they lie and they cheat and they steal. And to put my Uncle Louis a notch above the U.S. government, that's stretching. That is saying something horrible, because it's tough to get any worse than Monica Louie. But the U.S. government I can put in that category.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to tie that into government spending, because here's a very important point and one of the ways they propagandize, one of the ways they sugarcoat, glorify government, is they have us all believing that more money to the government is good. For instance, if we legalize marijuana, we can tax it, and that will bring in needed revenue to the state government. Hello, most state governments and the federal government, according to a poll at our libertarianlp.org website, we need, during some period of time, we can debate about how fast or slow it should be, the federal and state government should both be cut by 90% or more.
Right.
That there's that much overspending, waste, failed, clumsy bureaucracies that do more harm than good. That's really what we're talking about. And yet they'll say we need more money for the schools. I'm sorry. Have you ever done a comparison, which I have done in Massachusetts, between the schools that get the most money, which are usually the city schools that get all these subsidies, and the suburban and rural schools that put kids through for half the dollars per student per year? The latter have higher literacy, very high graduation rates. The city schools that are getting piled with money, $20,000, $30,000 a year per student, have 54% graduation rate, 40% functional literacy rates. I mean, the results are criminally bad. Right. No private business could ever survive with such horrible results. So more money is not the solution. More money to schools is just the teachers union lobbying for bigger pensions for people who are already retiring on average perhaps 13 years before people in the private sector who are paying Social Security. Right. Those teachers, now the younger ones are not getting such a good deal, but the older ones that have already retired or heading for retirement, they're retiring younger. They never had to pay Social Security tax. They get fat pensions that are 2, 3, 4, 5 times what people get on Social Security. They got automatic COLA increases. They have Cadillac healthcare plans, and they have government contracts that are set in stone, and these pensions are funded. They're 80% funded, whereas Social Security, that hundreds of millions of Americans are depending on, has $0 saved for these private. So more money isn't about anything that's good for you or for the average taxpayer, worker, citizen. It's good for the special interest pals of the politicians and for the politicians themselves. So every time you hear someone say, and this will be more money for the government, or more revenue for the government, you need to correct them when they try to say or just mindlessly mimic what we've all been programmed to believe, that this is a good thing. It is a bad thing. What we need is less money for the government, because less money for the government means more for you and him and her and everyone else who went out and earned that money. Will use it and spend it in the private sector, and will create twice as many jobs as what those same dollars will do in government coffers. Less spending, smaller government is much better.
Yeah. Well, why is that philosophy so foreign to the average American? Someone listening to that would say, well, that person obviously is a kook. I mean, literally, I get that. They go, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's perfectly logical, and they'll argue, but they have no idea what their argument is. And I say, what seems to be the argument? They go, well, you must be a fringe person. You obviously don't care.
I have to disagree with you there, because I think times have changed dramatically, especially in the last 10 years. And what our candidates and many others report all the time, people who are out on the campaign trail, on the hustings, talking to voters, and they mostly agree with what I just said, or they're not surprised by it, and they go, yeah.
Well, hallelujah, that's great.
They understand that government, but in the context of more revenue for the government, they're just so programmed to hearing that and believing it, and no one ever contradicts it. No one ever contradicts it. So it just sort of passes. And I even occasionally find, really liberty-minded people who will mimic this just because we've been brainwashed with it.
Right.
But most Americans, when they stop and think about it, and you say to them, and polls have shown, if you ask them, is government too big? Is it spending too much? They say yes. They want government. They know that government needs to spend less. They know that this deficit spending is reckless and dangerous to our economy. And Libertarian Party candidates are the ones who are out there delivering on solutions and specifically saying, if elected, I will cut total government spending. That's a good thing. That's good for you. That's good for your business. That's good for jobs. Less money in the wasteful government sector and more money in the productive private sector.
Yeah. When I was young, I went to the library and got a 8mm roll of movie of the building of the New York City subway system. And they consider that the seventh wonder of the world. And I think it was Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue, one of those, where a construction company actually cut down from the sidewalk straight down 50 feet or more in bedrock, men with picks and shovels. No guardrails. I'm not kidding you. No guard. People are walking. Person slips, they go straight down. They're dead. And they built this incredible subway system. No rules, no regulations, and yet that turned out to be the best mass transit system in the world. It is very complex. It is phenomenal. There were three major companies that were competing against one another. There was the BMT, the RT, and the IND, and one had a different track size, so the trains couldn't go from one to the other, which was really interesting. Yeah, and it's a fascinating story, and you see this, and you can't. And today, you can't put a hot dog stand on a sidewalk without getting arrested. But America was so free. That's why people wanted to come and they said, look at what you're accomplishing. But these were individuals doing it voluntarily. They were business people, they were workmen, they were artisans, these are the people. They're gone. There's no place for that today.
Yeah, business regulations are so insane. They're just, as my sister who owned a bed and breakfast out in Washington State says, if you're not a libertarian when you start a small business, government will soon convince you to be.
Right.
When you see all the many rules, regulations, permits, taxes that are imposed upon you and how detrimental that is to your ability to function, survive, make a profit, and hire people and create jobs.
Yeah. I received a letter 3 weeks ago. The government was advising me that my Social Security check, I know I look so young, I know I look so beautiful and young that you wouldn't believe I'm on Social Security, but I am. And they were increasing it by $13. And that surprised me that they would even increase it because according to the government, there's no inflation and all this other stuff. And I said, well, $13, big deal. All right. 2 weeks later, I receive another letter. The deductions from my Social Security went up by $149. Now, quite frankly, I don't need that money to live on. I've been working all my life. I still work. I have this whole studio. I paid for the entire studio. I even paid Preston here, my board manager. I shouldn't pay him a dime, but I do. Out of goodness in my heart, you know that. And, I have a booking agent and the whole bit. And this all costs money. It all comes out of my own pocket because it's for the cause. Be very honest with you. This is my hobby. But I still have businesses that I run and whatever. So Social Security is just an addendum. And I'm still paying Social Security because I still get a paycheck. My point being is that what about those people who are relying on their checks? And then the government says, we're going to increase the Social Security by X amount by the inflation or whatever, and people get a little bit more and they feel so relieved that they got, at least they can buy a couple of extra loaves of bread. And then a couple of weeks later, they get slammed with maybe $100, $200 less a month in their paycheck, in their Social Security check.
Because they changed the rules about what is taxable or I don't know what specifically caused that $200 to increase.
I think most of it had to do with health care.
Oh,
I think,
okay. So they
now,
grab
try to
the
figure it out. You're pretty
Yes.
good. You always got, they send you about 14 sheets with papers, and, it's like getting a letter from your doctor, a bill from your doctor, and trying to figure out what you're paying. You just pay it and shut up and go on and just hope that they send it to the right person. I can never figure them out. I called them. No one knows. They have to go to a third party. Third party never called you back. You just give up. You pay it. Shut up and pay it. Like my wife says, please, honey, shut up and eat. That's like that type thing.
That is one of their techniques. That's a lot of what Obamacare has done is they've made the whole insurance industry so incomprehensible. You get a bill, you don't know whether to pay it, and sometimes they'll send you a bill hoping you'll pay it because they don't think they'll get as much out of the insurance company. So you don't even know whether to pay it, and if you put it off, it might just go away, and if it doesn't, and you want to try and figure out why you are paying, no one has the time in their life to figure this stuff out, and then they end up in bankruptcy in many cases, and it's a real tragedy for a lot of people. I've known some people struggling with the very devastating fallout and the impact to their health when their insurance gets canceled, when even though they have insurance, this isn't covered, that isn't covered, this is going to cost you thousands of dollars for something you need, a test you need, a procedure you need. So insurance isn't insurance anymore. It's just a revenue stream for the insurance companies who are lobbying government to put all these laws in place on which they help write to make sure that they favor those insurance companies. So it's a huge racket, and it's going to and is very, very desperately hurting people's lives and their well-being.
Yeah. Well, just the other day, before the show, I told you that my little baby dog was attacked, my little boy, and he's the cutest little thing. He's sort of a Maltese mix or Coton de Tuliar or something, a gorgeous little dog, and he got attacked by two red line German Shepherds, and almost killed. I saved them just in time. I was just lucky at the right time, and everything was just worked out fine. But my hands were bleeding because I was all cut with dog bites and whatever. And I called my doctor. Said, I need a shot, this and that. Could not get through. I waited, couldn't get through. I called back, I waited, I couldn't get through. I wound up going to an emergency clinic, when he's,
There's $800, $800 or $1,000 or $2,000.
Well, actually, they actually took the Medicare and my insurance, so I don't know how much it got. It may have been $1,000. But my point being is I walked in and said, my hands are bleeding. I got bit by a dog. They said, come in. And they took me immediately and they took care of me. That's my point. And now, how much they're going to charge, I don't know. But I'll give you another example. 2 weeks ago, I actually had a jaw problem. It was a cartilage in the back of my jaw slipped. And it hurt like heck. And I wasn't sure if it was an ear problem, inner ear problem, or a jaw problem, because you can't tell the difference. It's so close. So I went to a dentist, which is a cash dentist, and made an appointment. They said, fine, come in at 8 o'clock. When I walked in at 8 o'clock, I was sitting down at the chair at 8 o'clock. Gal came in, did a preliminary examination. Doctor came in maybe a couple minutes after 8. I explained the situation. He looked at it. He says, no, it's not your ear, it's your jaw. This is what happened. In 20 minutes, I was out. I knew exactly what to do, and it cost $60. Now, that sounds like Fairyland. Yeah. I mean, it's absolute Fairyland. And I felt good. If he would have charged me $200, I would have been happy because I was able to see him. He only took 20 minutes of my time, and my time is worth money. So he didn't steal any of my time. In fact, we spent about 5 minutes just chatting, having a good time. So that really was only 15 minutes. And went on my way. I was early for my next appointment. Had that been in the regular healthcare system with all the stuff, I would still be there. It would be, and I have waited sometimes hours for my doctor that I've known for 30 years. And my doctor is so fed up. Every time I see him, he says, I'm getting out of this business. I'm going to become a truck driver. He wants out. He is so miserable. He can't stand it anymore. And I think he just stays as a doctor because he's known his patients for 30 and 40 years, and he figures in a few more years he's going to retire and give up the ghost altogether. The whole system is horrible. It's not only expensive, but it's a horrible system. And
It is. And that's one of the many, many problems with big government and big spending in government. And that is that the people, even the people who profit from it and who are holding on to their jobs and they're afraid to lose their jobs and they're holding on to their pensions and looking forward to retiring on their big fat government pensions, when they tell the truth, most of them are not very happy in their jobs. They're not satisfied. They know it's terribly wasteful. And when, a lot of Americans understand that government's very wasteful. In fact, an interesting survey that was done during one of our Massachusetts ballot initiatives to end the income tax back in 2000, this one was in 2008, I believe. They showed that in Massachusetts, the average person, and this is a very democratic state, believed that 41 cents on every dollar is wasted. Now, when you ask government employees, we did an informal survey the next year of government employees, and their average was 50%, 50 cents on a dollar.
Wow, that's interesting.
And I know a lot of people I'm living in the D.C. area, and I ask people who work in government, they know that there is tremendous, they see it every day, they know there's tremendous waste, and they don't even understand it as well as somebody who's spent their career in the private sector and has something to really more directly compare it to.
Right.
But they still can see, but they don't talk. That's the big cover-up. That's the big lie. That this spending, that this waste isn't happening, and that more of it's a good thing when more of it is a very, very bad thing. The fact that they've not only are they spending and deficit spending with great regularity, got up to $1 trillion in deficit spending a few years ago, a little less than that now. They started talking about 5 years ago about their 10-year budget plan to balance the budget. Now, in the real world, you don't take 10 years to balance a budget. You balance it now or you go out of business.
Right.
Now, they've been talking about a 10-year plan to balance a budget for 5 years, and every year it's still a 10-year plan. They have, in a sense, abandoned any intention of balancing the budget. They intend to continually, not forget paying down the debt we have. They have no intention to stop increasing it. And so This is the most dangerous kind of government overspending, because not only is it taxing us, it becomes a pretext for higher taxes. You notice the only reason the deficit isn't still $1 trillion is because they've increased taxes. They got rid of the small reduction in Social Security, 2%. They quietly, in the dead of night, flipped that back to the 15% it was. They added new Obamacare taxes. They're continually adding more taxes that are mandated by regulatory agencies that aren't even voted on in Congress. And this is happening at the state and federal level all the time, continually taking more money, and then spending. What's going to come of this country with this kind of debt and this kind of recklessness? One of the points I want to refer to, you said earlier about one of your prior guests estimated a $200 and some trillion dollar, what was the term he used?
Well, it was 210 trillion long-term debt. That's unfunded debt.
Unfunded debt. Now,
right.
That is, I presume that actually includes liability, right? So it's not actual money we owe today, but it's money we're expected
that we are committed to pay, to spend. It's sort of like a long-term loan. If you went to the bank and you had a 5-year loan and you had to pay $10,000 a year, on the loan, and you had a $50,000 loan, if someone said, "Well, how much do you owe the bank?" You wouldn't say $10,000. You'd say $50,000 plus interest. Well, our government says,
that case, but here's the point I'm making. In the case of an actual contractual long-term loan, that is actual debt, whether it's short or long-term.
Right.
A lot of when they talk about liability, or what I think your guest was referring to, was obligations based on current law. Here's the thing. If we convince people to really get off the dime and stop voting for these hopeless big government Democrats and Republicans and start voting Libertarian every time they vote in every election. And if you don't have a Libertarian on the ballot, write a Libertarian in, write yourself in. But never ever give a vote to big government. If we convince enough people to do that, we can change those laws. We can change that long-term liability. We can erase a lot of that 210, and we can do it not only painlessly, but at great benefit to the workers and taxpayers and retirees of this country who are drifting more and more into poverty as a result of this reckless government fiscal policy.
Yeah. Are we going to take a break just for 1 minute? Is that okay with you, Carla? All right, just for 1 minute. And will you stay with us? You won't escape, will you?
I will.
Okay, just stay with us, because the subject I want to bring up, and I think this is a good follow-through, would be the term austerity and how that's being used today, okay? Hold on, we'll be right. Folks, don't go away. And by the way, I want to remind everyone, you can call in if you have any questions for Carla or myself, 646-652-4620. Let's hear from you. Now, please hold on. We'll be back in one moment, please. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio, America's Libertarian Voice, and we're pleased to have Carla Howell with us, a political director for the National Libertarian Party. We're talking about debt, government debt, and government responsibility. Carla, a lot has been said in the past year about, in the past 2 years, in fact, about the terrible, despicable situation that Greece has got itself into. And they use this term austerity. And it sounds, austerity is such a bad thing, back in the old days, and I keep on bringing up the old days, I mean, everything was that way. I mean, everyone watched every penny. My mother used to send me down to the Morris's grocery store, which was downstairs underneath our apartment, and I had specific instructions to get 2 slices of ham, a pickle, and whatever the case may be, counted out the money, and I had to come back with that money plus any change. I mean, that was the way we always lived. We didn't have credit cards or anything, and anything that we had was ours. We didn't expect anything from anyone else. In Greece, what happened is that it's everybody else's money that doesn't exist, by the way, given to someone else. And when the government says, by the way, we just ran out of borrowing money, that's other people's money, we ran out of it, so we can't give it to you, they consider that austerity. Well, austerity is a good thing, not a bad thing. They should be rioting the streets when there is no austerity. Now, have I totally lost my mind, or should I move to a different planet?
Well, it's good to have people who remember the old times who can give us some perspective on this. Of course, this is part of the manipulation. It's very similar and related to the manipulation that government spending is a good thing, meaning when we reduce it, even when we don't have the money to spend, even when these government workers are being overpaid to begin with and have fat pensions they shouldn't have in the first place, then, you're right. Austerity is a manipulation. It is, and they portray it as a bad thing. They portray austerity as a bad thing as opposed to a good thing. And I hadn't even thought of it that way till you told me that story, because I had just been so programmed to believe that austerity was a bad thing.
Yeah.
That what I would have said, which I think is also true, is that the austerity in the negative sense that they are completely ignoring is What about the people who don't have government pensions? What about the people who are trying to run a business and are being taxed and regulated to death? Talk about austerity. These people are actually working themselves to the bone in a lot of cases, whereas government workers typically don't. And excuse me, so this idea of austerity in the negative sense is very manipulative, that they only pay attention. It's just like when they talk about cutting government spending. They never talk about, or when they talk about raising taxes, they never talk about how the Christmas gifts you're not going to be able to buy for your kids, the vacation you've been promising your family you're not going to be able to take them on, the amount of money you're not going to be able to put away in your retirement that you really should be doing, the furnace you won't be able to fix, the drafty windows you won't be able to replace. They don't talk about the impact on the private sector whenever you take money out of it and by taxing people, or by deficit spending and printing money and devaluing the dollar, which does the same thing. It's just a hidden tax. So they never talk about that negative austerity in that sense. But they only talk about the hardships on government. But as you point out, austerity is a very good thing. It just, for people who are overspending and need to get their act together, it's called fiscal responsibility. It's called balancing your budget. It's what all entities should do, and above all, governments should do, but they're not. And then they have the audacity to complain about these people who are already very privileged in what they're getting compared to the people who are having to foot the bill for all of this.
Yeah. I guess I come from a different world, and I should be taken out and shot, because today, when I speak to people, especially young people, like my board operator, he talks about his student loan. I mean, I wouldn't buy a house for the amount of a student loan. I mean, my mind is so different. They talk about credit card debt. I go, don't you pay it off every month? And I tell you.
But I have sympathy for the students. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And they've been manipulated. They've been manipulated in a number of ways. They've been told they have to go to college or they won't get a job, which is a lie.
Right.
But even to the degree it's true, and it is true that certain jobs you absolutely have to have a college degree for under the law. That is, again, a government contrivance. Who says you have to have 10 years of training to legally diagnose somebody with a cold?
Right.
Yeah, okay, certain nurse practitioners can do that today, but a lot of doctors spend a lot of their day. I've worked in the medical field. Now, some of them do very specialized, very intense stuff, and they should be well paid because they're doing something that few people can do. But many of them are doing pretty rote stuff. Especially the general practitioners, and they cry about general practitioners. They're not making enough money. Well, they'd be fine if they weren't having to pay, for all the regulatory staff that they have to comply with. Correct. In order to operate their business. This is what's killing them. But in fact, you don't need 10 years to diagnose an upper respiratory illness, a cold, which you see 20, 40 patients a day with this for years on end. You don't need 10 years of training to do that job. But the government has mandated that you have this college degree, that college degree. This is true in accounting, the legal field, medical field, actuaries, and all kinds of government contracts mandate. And I've been in companies where you get a government request for proposal, or you get a government contract, and it says you have to have, it doesn't tell you what you have to get done. No, they talk about you have to have 10 employees on this project, and 2 of them must have a mechanical engineering degree, and 3 of them must have a double E degree. Why? I've worked with engineers for many years when I was working in the private sector. When I wasn't in politics, I'm still actually in the private sector because I'm a libertarian, but but I've known many engineers throughout my life who are absolutely brilliant, who never finished college. College does not determine whether you are capable of doing a job. And sadly, these very expensive colleges are turning out lots of kids who are not prepared for the working world. Now, that's not to say there's certainly good programs and good schools and lots of good teachers and good students, and there's people for whom it works and is successful, albeit overpriced. But a lot of it is just a big racket that is perpetuating the education establishment and giving them all kinds of powers and privileges and government contracts and subsidies. They get tons of them. And for what? To impoverish these kids who were pretty much threatened or misled into believing that they needed this college degree. And a lot of them are wising up to realizing they don't.
Yeah. My father came here with not a penny in his pocket, not even a lira in his pocket. And he complained for, I think on his deathbed, he was still complaining that his mother-in-law hounded him for the $14 that she lent him, And he always complained about that. But yet he opened and eventually had a factory on First Avenue and had 200 people working for him. And he came here with nothing. And when he died, he still couldn't speak English properly. No one understood him. Everyone said, yes, Victor, yes. They went yes because they didn't want to argue with him because they couldn't understand him. And here's a man who could hardly speak English. Could read, but yet had a factory with 200 people working for him. How could that be? He had to leave school at 6 years old. I'm sorry, I think the 6th grade education is the highest grade elementary school he had. And when Mussolini came over, he actually went into the Italian Navy, went into the submarine division, because every time the submarine went down, they very rarely came up, but when they went down, he actually got paid extra money, and the family needed the money. He actually put his life on the line so he can help his mother, feed the family and whatever. But it's a hard life. And I tell my sons, and there's a point to all this, by the way. I used to say, all right, Preston, don't laugh. There's always a point to what I have to say.
And then there's a follow-up, which I'll get to.
Okay. And I said, I used to make $362.50, and when I made that money, I still took $5 and put it away. And people say, you made only $362 a week? I said, no, a month. And they cannot believe that. And I said, I still put $5 away. So when you guys talk about, I have credit card this, credit card that, how come, why? I didn't do that. I had no credit cards at the time, but yet I still put $5 away, and I made a fraction of what you make, even if you adjust it for inflation. Here's my problem. Where did I get that from? I got that from my family. My family understood austerity. They understood you never spend. My mother used to go to Bloomingdale's to shop once a year. I was a little kid. I used to go with her. We used to get on the train and used to go to Bloomingdale once a year. Not every Saturday, not every Sunday, not every holiday that they went shopping. Once a year. And it seems that we've lost all of that, and everything is spend, spend, spend. Keep your time spending and forget. Now, here's my big problem. Is that we say, well, these poor kids are being misled. Where are their parents? They're being raised by their parents, not by the school system and not by the government. And I blame the parents. But go ahead, I'll give you the next hour.
I'm sure parents make individual choices, and they certainly play a big part. But spending isn't inherently bad if you're making the money. And if the society is profitable and prosperous, and there's jobs and there's opportunities, and people can pursue their dreams and change jobs and look for what's really right for them, and they make a lot of money in the process, good for them.
Right, I agree.
There's no problem spending money per se. There's no virtue in austerity unless you don't have the money, and that's what you have to do. So I don't fault people who go to Bloomingdale's every Saturday if that's what they want to do. If they are being fiscally responsible. Now, but let's get to solutions. Let's talk about what people so rarely talk about, and that is, what are we going to do about it? You and I can sit and chat for days and complain about it all, but what are we going to do about it? The Libertarian Party is running candidates for the express purpose of shrinking government, getting government off our backs so we can be more prosperous, so there will be more jobs, abundant jobs, so that people have far more career opportunity, so people have a lot of spare change that they can give to charities or help out that relative who's having hard times or somebody with a medical problem. So much is possible when we get government out of the way. Not only does it enrich people and businesses and jobs, but it also gets rid of all the harmful and destructive elements of government. That includes foreign meddling, starting unnecessary wars, destabilizing the entire Middle East on the false premise of weapons of mass destruction, which any libertarian who reads or non-libertarian who was reading, sites like antiwar.com and other resources on the internet knew in 2002 that was a bunch of hoopla. There was no weapons of mass destruction. John Kerry, who voted for the war, could have seen that. Anyone in Congress could have seen that. They were getting these private briefings pretending that that there was this huge threat that had nothing to do with 9/11. What on earth did Iraq have to do with 9/11? Nothing. They were pressured, but they could have gone online and seen that this was a bunch of junk. This was false. These were trumped up reasons for going to war. We got to get rid of this stuff. This cost. Now we have ISIS. We lost 4,000 servicemen and women. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East have lost their lives. Billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars in property has been destroyed. And Lord knows how long it's going to take to straighten out the situation. That's just one example of very bad big government spending.
Right.
We stop this, we have a world of peace. We have nobody making a target out of America, and we dramatically reduce our threat of a terrorist attack. There were dozens of libertarian federal candidates in 2014, and there will be more in 2016, who took pledges, including cut military spending by 60%, pull out of the Middle East, get out of all these close down all these foreign bases where we don't belong, bring down the military to one that is truly a defensive organization that defends the United States and nothing more, and quits wasting money, intervening all over the world and creating enemies. They also committed to ending the federal income tax and balancing the budget, bringing spending from what's now $4.1 trillion down to $1.65 trillion. That was the year of 1998 when Bill Clinton was president. It has more than doubled since then. We bring spending down to that level. It was mighty big back then. Government was huge back then. It was huge 50 years ago and keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We can easily reduce it down to the year 1998 and we'll still have too much government, too much waste and bureaucracy, too many regulations, but we'll be on the way. And in doing that, we get rid of the income tax. That's $11,575 back in the family budget of the average family in the United States every year. Clear, every year, $11,000 plus dollars, and millions of new jobs that will result from transferring that money out of the wasteful government sector into the private productive sector. We also had dozens of candidates committed to ending the failed war on drugs that is incarcerating hundreds of thousands of innocent people, making our streets unsafe, and creating this racial disparity that we find in law enforcement today that is leading to all kinds of problems. Luckily, it's being finally understood by people. It would get rid of consolidate the 17 spy apparatuses that we have in the federal government down to 1 or 2, save tons of money, end mass surveillance, end all these abuses of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy, and search without warrant by the federal government. There are so many things to be gained by downsizing government, and it can be done easily if we simply muster the public will that is convincing other people and each of us individually committing ourselves to going to the polls and voting Libertarian. And write in a Libertarian if there isn't one on the ballot, write yourself in. But what you do when you go to the ballot and you vote and you refuse to vote for a big government Democrat or a big government Republican, what you're telling them is, you're not getting our vote. We're here, we're ready, and when the candidate comes along who's going to do the right thing, we'll vote for him. We are showing up at the polls, but we're not going to give you a vote, which essentially gives them permission to continue to do all the bad things that they're doing. It's the worst thing you can do. And a lot of people fall into this mindset of lesser of two evils. We got to not let the Democrat or not let the Republican get elected. And that's the wrong way of thinking about it, because the difference between how Democrats and Republicans behave in office is virtually indistinguishable to most people. I've said this to many political activists who are very politically knowledgeable. If you take the average Democrat in Congress and the average Republican, you take their voting history, you black out their name and their political party, you put them down in front of a seasoned political activist and say, you tell me which one's a Democrat or Republican based on their voting record.
Right.
And they're not going to be able to tell you. Because, if they're a legislative assistant who actually helped push some of the bills through, they might a few bills they might be able to tell. But by and large, they can't tell because they're all voting for higher government spending, higher taxes, more regulations, and more military intervention. And every time you vote for either a Democrat or Republican, you are giving them permission, you are giving them license to continue to do more of the same. The way you break that chain is you vote Libertarian, and you do it at every election.
I agree. I applaud you for saying that. I think what a lot of people be concerned about is that if you take that path, we will be like Greece. We'll have to go through this period of adjustment, which will put many people out of work, which it will, because they're makeshift jobs, they're unproductive jobs. In other words, they would be civil chaos, because so many people would be out of work only because many of the jobs are somewhat directly or indirectly subsidized by the government, or are makeshift jobs in a way that sound good.
Let me disagree with you a little bit there. I don't think there would be chaos at all, because remember, every job that you eliminate from the government, and under the condition that you return that money to the private sector, that creates 2 jobs for every 1 job lost. This was discovered by an economic model by the Beacon Hill Institute in Boston in 2010. They were analyzing our ballot initiative to cut the sales tax in half, which would have taken $2.5 billion out of the state government of Massachusetts. Not a huge sum, but it's $2.5 billion. That would have resulted in 17,000 lost jobs in the state government and 33,000 new jobs in the private sector.
Wow.
That is not a chaotic situation. That is a jobs bonanza.
I'm a disciple. I'm with you.
And this is how we've been propagandized into believing it's a bad thing that you take money away from government. No, money when it's spent creates jobs. And the only thing is when government spends it, you get half as many jobs as when the private sector spends it, because it's so wasteful.
Right, but the government has to back down and can't initiate more restrictions to restrict people from going into business.
Well,
they have to back down. They say, now do what you want to do. They can't take away the money and then initiate more restrictions, and then no one moves anywhere. Then everyone has to come back. But the government would probably do that, so the people will come back to the government and say, "Help me, save me from this disaster."
Don't give them that cover by even suggesting.
I don't want to, believe me,
because they're unrelated. There's no relationship between more regulations and laying off. That's just a contrived association when there shouldn't. I mean, they're always jamming new regulations on us, whether or not they are implementing austerity or sequester or whatever gimmick they say they're doing to cut spending, which they almost never really do. So the fact of the matter is, we also need to get rid of government regulations. We need to repeal thousands upon thousands of laws. There's so many laws and regulations. No human being has the time in their lifetime to read them all, much less understand, much less figure out how to comply with them. It's impossible. They're just, and what lawmakers should be doing and what libertarian candidates are running for is to repeal. We need to refresh and remind people of this wonderful word called repeal, not enact laws, not more bills, not more, let's all get along so we can get something done in government and pass a bill. No, the only thing that gets done in government is to repeal all the junk that's been put there by the Democrats and Republicans who've been passing laws for 200 years.
Yeah,
150.
And most of them complain that, when they do receive a bill, it's the night before. It's 1,400 pages. It's all legalese. I mean, if you had 4-year college and you did nothing but study this bill, you wouldn't finish it in 4 years of college. And they want you to vote on it the next morning at 8:00. And so, what confounds me is that I'd find this to be the easiest job in the world. I would take it, throw it in the garbage, and the next day vote no. I don't care what it says. I would vote no if it's 1,400 pages.
That part of the job is easy. Now the other part of the job that's very critical, though, is we need to elect people who do more than vote no. We need people who propose and co-sponsor bills to shrink government, like the pledges at lp.org. If you go to lp.org, search on candidate pledge, you'll see the 4 pledges that were in place for 2014. There'll be more next year, where these candidates pledged, if elected, they would co-sponsor bills to end the income tax, balance the budget, cut military spending 60%, end the war on drugs, and end the violations of the Fourth Amendment, get rid of the NSA, repeal the Patriot Act, welcome home Edward Snowden. Measures that reduce government, and that will in turn make everybody's lives far better, will make America far more prosperous, will get rid of lots of debt, will create tremendous job opportunities, and create all kinds of opportunities for better health, more harmony, better education, more preparedness for the world, more peace and harmony, less crime. All these things result from less government. Yep. And we need candidates willing to go into office and that propose, co-sponsor, and work to pass these bills. That's what Libertarian Party candidates are running for.
Yep. Carla, do you have any inside information, and this is an unfair question, by the way, as to why Rand Paul did not follow his father's footsteps?
Well, I think I can't speak for him, but what it appears is that, he has taken this approach of electability, which is a big Achilles heel around that he now lives with, and that he had to make deals with the devil to do that. He had to promise to endorse Mitt Romney for president.
That I couldn't. I still have the shakes on that one. Yeah.
He promised to endorse Mitch McConnell for U.S. Senate, and and then he has to go along with this rhetoric, and he even went so far as to vote in favor of $100-some billion in more military spending, as if we need more military spending. So he has definitely sold out from his father's and many libertarians' ideals on certain issues. He's stayed good on some issues like Fourth Amendment, right. But he's gone that path of electability, and you can argue that on the one hand he has helped to get libertarian ideas out there, and I would give him credit for that. Right. But he's also done some very dangerous things, and I think people underestimate the damage done by endorsing the likes of Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell. These are very big government politicians, and what it does is it reinforces this false idea that you have to vote Republican if you're fiscally conservative, or you have to vote Democrat if you're socially liberal, when in fact neither party delivers on either, and they both make these things worse across the board. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. We need, just as we need competition in order for people to get good prices and put in an honest day's work, we need competition in politics. And when you try to say, vote Democrat or Republican, those are your only choices, then you're playing right into the hands of big government, because they, with their media allies, neatly carve out, okay, here's your Democrat, here's your Republican, both big government, both are going to vote pretty much identically on more war, more spending, more taxes, more encroachments on your civil liberties, Oh, and this one's maybe slightly better. The fact of the matter is the difference between the two of them that you could possibly argue for is less than the difference between what they say they'll do in office and what they actually will do in office. Okay? So
well said.
It's absolutely throwing darts when it comes to picking between a Democrat and Republican, but you're not throwing them at a board. You're throwing them in your own face.
Right.
You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your family. You're hurting the United States of America, our economy, and our future when you vote for big government Democrats or big government Republicans. When you vote Libertarian, you're breaking that cycle. You're breaking the chain. You're creating a possibility for actually not only stopping the encroachment of more big government, but making government much, much smaller.
Yep. In this upcoming presidential election, will the Libertarian Party be recognized in all 50 states, you think, or are they going to be out a couple of states like they did last time?
Entirely possible. I mean, we're now petitioning in Oklahoma, and if you know anyone in Oklahoma,
that's me. I know, I've already been contacted by them.
Seriously, we are petitioning right now in Oklahoma, and we need more petitioners there. That's the toughest state in the country, the one you're sitting in. So please encourage anyone you know, and I encourage anyone listening to this who's in Oklahoma or can get there for a couple months and wants to take a shot at petitioning. We're paying, and help us get that on the ballot. If we get on the ballot in Oklahoma, there's a very good chance, and in fact, a likelihood, I would say, that we will be on in all 50 states. Okay. Oklahoma is the tough one, though. There's others that are tough also, but Oklahoma is especially challenging.
Now, Gary Johnson is well known, and hopefully he will be a candidate. Are there any other well-known people that may be candidates vying for the position of Libertarian for president that you can talk about at this time, or?
Well, it's been in the media that Jesse Ventura has said publicly on a number of occasions that he is considering running as a Libertarian.
Yeah.
He would have to join the Libertarian Party. That's a requirement. He has said he doesn't want to join any party. That's not going to work if he wants to run for Libertarian nomination. There's been others who've been sort of sniffing around the edges, a few with money, and former federal politicians who have asked that their name not be disclosed at this time, so I can't say whether any of them will or will not jump into the race. There's currently 10 Libertarian candidates who have met minimal requirements to be recognized as candidates, who are at our website, lp.org. And so there's a lot of interesting ideas coming out of those candidates as well. Who will end up making it to the convention and being on the convention floor in Orlando Memorial Day weekend next year when we have our Libertarian National Convention is yet to be seen.
Okay. Well, Carla, we're just about out of time. I'd like to give you the last 30 seconds to wrap things up.
Cut government spending and do it by giving that money back to people through taxes, income tax, sales tax, property tax. This is the absolute best thing we can do for liberty. If you love liberty, you can talk about it forever, but when the rubber meets the road, it's about voting Libertarian, it's about running for office on proposals to cut government, and that's what the Libertarian Party is doing. So please join us and please support your Libertarian candidates.
May I take the liberties in saying that you are absolutely wonderful. I enjoyed you so much.
I want her to run for president. I want to vote for her.
Preston wants to vote for you. Carla.
Thank you, Preston. I can recommend all kinds of great candidates. Go to lp.org. We already have some fantastic candidates. A guy named Buckley in Georgia running for U.S. Senate, Sean Howell running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. A whole bunch of them at state, local, and federal level are lining up, and they're going to be absolutely fantastic.
And we will have them on our program, as the time comes. Carla, thank you so much for being on our program. I hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carla. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Folks, this is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.